Vahavta. Vahavta means you shall love. You shall love God with all your heart is the whole line. What facet of that word, what name of God would you give your love, devote yourself to this new year? You shall love life with all your heart. You shall love love with all your heart. You shall love expansiveness, ripening, stillness, imagination, creativity. You shall love the possibility of something new with all your heart. That elusive possibility of something new. The audacious notion that the places that feel absolutely stuck and intransigent, whether the personal or the global, right? The pounds that we wish we could lose, or the budgets we wish we could stick to, or the dynamics with family members, with our children, our parents, our siblings, we wish would somehow change the foundational racism of our society. Patriarchy in all its guises, transgenerational poverty, homelessness in our own backyard, a deepening rift, ever deepening across our country in ideology and norms of civility, in understanding of reality and truth itself. The audacious notion that the places that feel absolutely stuck and intransigent could somehow be transformed. Happy New Year. Blessed time of year, given power by our collective imagination, by our shared dream of a turning point in the calendar. What spark of possibility do you cup your holy hands around? Not quite daring to hope that this time it might kindle true. Even as we brace ourselves for an incoming administration so at odds with our values, what newness might you dare let yourself wish for this year? My family is getting ready to move. We're going to move at the end of the month to be a little closer to the church and to the rest of our lives. We're so grateful for the help of the church to make that happen. And as we have been preparing for this move, we've been saying things to each other, my wife and I, in our new house, followed by the grand declarations of how much better life will be. Every little detail of our lives really will be perfect in our new house. In fact, it's been so clear that everything will change for the better that I've become calling it our magic house. In the magic house, new possibilities abound. And I tease now my wife about it because she's the one who has the most declarations about how many things will change for the better. And so I say, oh yes, in our magic house. But there is a truth in it, a truth in the prophet artist's imagination that she calls forth when she talks about what will happen in our new house. Because this invitation, whether it's in a new house or a new year or whatever is coming on the horizon of our lives, it's the invitation to become the prophet, as the theologian Walter Brueggemann would say. The prophet engages in futuring fantasy. The prophet doesn't ask if the vision can be implemented. Their questions of implementation are of no consequence until the vision can be imagined. The imagination must come before implementation. Our culture is competent to implement almost anything and imagine almost nothing, he says. Isn't that true? Our culture is competent to implement almost anything and imagine almost nothing. The same royal consciousness, which is his term for empire, for the way of thinking that controls and dominates, the same royal consciousness that makes it possible to implement anything and everything is the one that shrinks imagination, because imagination is a danger. Thus, every totalitarian regime is frightened of the artist. It is the vocation of the prophet to keep alive the ministry of imagination, to keep on conjuring and proposing futures alternative to the single one the king wants to urge as the only thinkable one. In our tradition, we talk about the prophethood and the priesthood of all believers. The necessity that every one of us is engaged in this kind of radical imagining, this prophethood. But it's not easy, is it, with all that we must take care of to survive in this world, to get through our day-to-day lives, to step back and imagine another possibility. And so we spend time frustrated, staring instead at the blank stuckness before us. I think about the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. When he was a young man, he was very frustrated that his work wasn't coming to fruition more easily. It wasn't gaining popularity. He spent frustrated years trying to find that imagination, to articulate it, find a place for it in the world. And he would visit the zoo when he lived in Paris, watching there a panther pacing back and forth in its cage, feeling his own frustration as he stalked the streets, struggling with who he would become. And eventually from that time he spent, the apocryphal story is that he spent 7 hours just looking at that panther in the cage. He eventually wrote one of his most famous poems, The Panther. His vision from the constantly passing bars has grown so weary that it cannot hold anything else. It seems to him there are 1,000 bars, and behind the bars, no world. As he paces in cramped circles over and over, the movement of his powerful, soft strides is like a ritual dance around a center in which a mighty will stands paralyzed. Only at times the curtain of the pupils lifts quietly, an image enters, rushes down through the tensed, arrested muscles, plunges into the heart, and is gone. This aliveness, this wildness caught in a cage, arrested, a mighty will standing paralyzed, how excruciating it is to witness the yearning of life, to engage, to roam, to grow, to change, frustrated by the bars of a cage. Do you know something about that feeling of being trapped in a life too small for your soul to inhabit? There's another apocryphal story told about a regal white tiger named Mohini, who lived in the Washington, D.C. Zoo in the 1960s. And the meditation teacher, Tara Brach, who incidentally is one of those UU leaders, we're talking about what we incubate in Unitarian Universalism. She's a Buddhist teacher who grew up Unitarian Universalist, was incubated in this tradition, and is now a very influential spiritual teacher. She tells the story like this. For most of those years, Mohini's home was in the old lion house at the zoo. a typical 12 by 12 cage with iron bars and a cement floor. And she would spend her days pacing back and forth in her cramped quarters. Eventually, biologists and the staff realized that this was no way for this regal white tiger to live and worked together to create a natural habitat for her. Covering several acres now, it had hills, trees, a pond, variety of vegetation. And with excitement and anticipation, they released Mohini from her old lion's cage into her new and expansive environment. But it was too late. The tiger immediately sought refuge in a corner of the compound where she lived for the remainder of her life. She paced and paced around in that corner until a 12 by 12 foot square of grass was bare. So it does take more than a new home for the magic to happen. So whenever we are pacing our own 12 by 12 foot corner, habituated to whatever artificial limits of our lives might have been, or real limits that we have continued to live in our now more expansive capabilities. The personal stories that confine us, the limiting stories of that's just how I am, just who I am, the cultural stories that bind us, the rigid bars of social patterning blinding us to more expansive freedom, blinding us to the wildness and wholeness that's possible. Because no matter how stuck we are, no matter how rigid the real bars, a voice yet whispers about this wildness and wholeness to come, beckons us to break free and change and grow. What Tara Brach says about the story is that the way out of the cage begins with accepting absolutely everything we are feeling about ourselves and our lives, just as it is. By embracing, in her words, wakefulness and care for our moment-to-moment experience. By accepting absolutely everything, what I mean is that we are aware of what is happening within our body and mind in any given moment without trying to control or judge or pull away. And doesn't that sound nice? To live in that place of radical acceptance. But I notice that it's actually a paradox. There's part of this paradoxical calling on our lives in deeply listening to what life wants for us, what God wants for us, or however you think about this, into the deepest stirrings of our heart and to the world, we hear both the call to being and the call to becoming. We have the paradox of being and becoming always with us. The call to becoming invites us to grow and change, pulls us forward on our way. It's the call of vision and dream and hope and possibility, while the call to being invites us into loving and inhabiting ourselves right here and now, to dwell fully in this moment, knowing it's enough, we're enough, exactly as we are. And sometimes, for me at least, these callings can feel at odds with each other. Listening deeply brings us into a place sometimes of the tension between these two life-serving impulses. And our culture, that royal consciousness, places a premium on the becoming side of things. In modernity, becoming is heavily prized over being, which gives us that idea that growth is about ever onward and upward. the notion, which really, if we think about it deeply, is ludicrous just on its face, that not only growth, but the rate of growth must perpetually increase. When we think about growth like this, it can color everything in our lives as if that's how we should always be striving, more and more and faster. This understanding of growth only sees becoming, does not understand that being holds an equal importance in life's development. It was one of Freud's students, Wilhelm Reich, who talked about first this idea that every organism grows not by expanding and expanding and expanding, but by expanding and contracting. Expanding and contracting. The in-breath and the out-breath, both important parts of the pattern of growth. The pulsation of life, the body's ability to do both expansion and contraction, to not get stuck in one state. It's the fundamental current of life's energy. Call it that pulsation of life, or orgone, as Reich named it, or chi, as it's understood in Chinese traditions, or prana in the Ayurvedic traditions, or mana in Polynesian. So many spiritual practices invite us to listen deeply to this life energy moving within and among and beyond us, to align ourselves with it, to move with it in the dance of being and becoming. And I think there's a relief here. For me, I find a relief from my struggle to either the call to accept myself exactly as I am and become more of who I hope to be. The revelation that these callings are both part of the same movement, each anticipated in the other. That when I'm contracting, I'm not, as my culture might try to convince me, failing at becoming, but rather preparing for the next breath in. I think it's what one of the illustrious deceased members of our congregation talked about, Bernie Loomer, who started our personal theology talks. He was a process theologian, this school of theology trying to bring together liberal Christianity and science and reason. And he would ask, as the beginning of the conversations he started with people here, what is the size of your soul? What is the size of your soul? By which he meant, what is your soul's ability to grow and expand, to contract and then stretch when life throws more contradictions your way? In his words, he said, by size, which he capitalized every letter of and put dashes in between, I mean the stature of a person's soul, the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being and still maintain your integrity and individuality, the intensity and variety of outlook you can entertain in the unity of your being without feeling defensive and insecure. I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development of their diversity and uniqueness. I mean the power to sustain more complex and enduring tensions. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. So let us tend to the size of our souls this new year, just as they are and in their becoming. Let us hold hands, share water, keep imagining, for our lives and our world are inviting us beyond whatever bars now obscure our vision. May it be so, and amen.